Some of y'all don't take summer music very seriously, but around here we really, really, really do. There's new Lorde to talk about. There's new Addison Rae to talk about. So much to talk about. The group chat is here. They are ready to get into it. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. We are barely a week into June. We've been blessed with some pretty big records that we got to talk about. The group chat is here. Joan Summers is here. Maura Johnston is here. Rollie Pemberton is here. Hello to all of you. Welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hi, Elamin.
Hi. What a delight. What a time to be living in. Okay, I want to start with the fact that, like, in the last week alone, we got a new Miley Cyrus album. We got a new song from Sabrina Carpenter this week. We got a new Lorde single, which we'll get to in a moment. But respectfully, if I had to bet on one singer, being like, this summer might be mine, I'm going to bet this one. We are not belting. We are softly singing into the microphone. That is the only thing that we are doing this summer. That is Diet Pepsi. That is Addison Rae. We met her as a TikTok influencer, and she's managed to do the improbable, which has become a legitimate, bona fide pop star. Charli XCX helped her get there. We'll talk about that in a moment. But today, the debut album, Addison, came out. Joan, look, we've been talking about this moment for a minute. Last year was Brat Summer, Charli XCX. Why is 2025 going to be the summer of Addison Rae, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Addison Rae, you said just perfectly, did the impossible by fully transcending from TikTok stardom to pop stardom. It is a pipeline that has been paved by many other people before her, but none quite like her, where they started on the internet as a TikToker. She was a college student, cheerleading. She was in Louisiana, got on the internet, and fully transitioned from that to this. And I think she's really the first one to do it in this way. And what I think people are picking up on is when she debuted, there was a lot of chatter about authenticity. Is this real? Can we trust what she's doing? Is this really coming from her heart? Is it really coming from her soul? And I think despite all the criticism she faced post-Diet Pepsi, which were totally unfounded and mostly teenagers on the internet, if you ask me, I think that she stuck her guns. She did something weird. She put out something unlike any of what her peers are doing right now. She found some luminaries in New York. She found some luminaries overseas to help produce the record. And speaking of that record and those luminaries, all women. I think it's one of the first pop albums this year that we can confidently say is produced entirely by a team of up-and-coming young women. So I'm very proud of her, and I just think that people are finally resonating with what she's rocking.
Joan Summers said Addison Rae is for the girls. Okay, I understand the idea of having Addison arriving at this moment and getting here, but what's fascinating to me about this process, Maura, is that the idea of going on this journey from social media personality, not just social media personality, but someone who's kind of like known for dances. People were like, I kind of find it a little bit cringy, but also she just kept on rising and rising as a star. And then getting to the point of being like, I have something to say. And have something to say, and I have credibility in having something to say. When you get the cosign from someone like Charli XCX, does that surprise you? That's sort of like to make this journey and still get that credibility.
I don't think it does. I think we're in a very different environment now, even than 5 years ago. I've been thinking a lot about how, if Stars Are Blind by Paris Hilton came out today, it would not be as derided as it was when it came out initially. Because people didn't like it when it came out initially. Yeah. But, there's a lot more sort of room for people from whatever background to kind of make their stake their claim in pop. She did kind of release a first single that did not go anywhere. And it did kind of go that, producers who are proven quantities route. It was called Obsession, and it kind of just it came out in 2022 and then it did nothing. And then, this sort of reinvention that she did with Charli XCX, which I'm not saying that it's not authentic. I'm just saying, it is definitely a different step. She was objectively a famous person with a lot of followers, but at the same time, she also had this kind of siloed fame, because the nature of fame right now is very kind of like, you can be famous to like this million people or this million people or this 6 million people, and still a lot of people might not know you. So that also, I think, plays into it, where it's like, she's still new to a lot of people. And as far as like her lyrics, she's going, I feel like it's very like meta and campy, winking commentary on like where she is and where she has been, where she wants to go, which I think think endears her to the public a little bit more too. It's very in line with Charlie XCX, right? Who loves pop music but also knows that it's her job and treats it both those ways, often at the same time.
First of all, that idea of like fame as being siloed or music as being siloed, I think that reminds me of "Die with a Smile," the Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars song that went #1. I was like, to this date, I've not met one person who's heard that song, so that sounds like it seems a little bit fake to me. But Joan, you were going to say something there before I get to you, Rollie. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's also important too, Charlie XCX is so omnipresent in the conversation around her, but I also want to give credit where it's due to people like Dara, the fashion director at Interview Magazine, who also is one of the architects. There was a TikTok I saw that said that Addison Rae's look is Dara's fever dream. And I think that is so true. If you're reading Interview, if you know what the New York fashion girls are doing, like Mel and all of his many students, I think that it's also important to see that she didn't just get a cosign from the music industry. She's gotten a cosign from what people see as the coolest people in the fashion industry too.
So when you sort of survey the way that Addison is landing, Rollie, and sort of like look at this, does it feel authentic to you? Do you hear this record and go, you know what, this feels like you are trying to give me something that is coming genuinely from you?
Typically it's the kind of thing that I would, my soul would tell me this is contrived. But knowing what's actually going on, I feel like it really is authentic. I definitely feel like there was a bit of a PR blitz to establish Addison's coolness. It's like this is the cool girl vibes. The Charlie XCX cosign, which by the way, that Von Dutch remix is amazing.
Huge.
It's like such an incredible song.
Yes.
That was the first thing that perked me up, where I was like, oh wait, she's really about that life.
Yeah.
Like she really wants to do this. She wants to make music. It's not just like a TikTok celebrity, like who's just like, how can I be more famous?
Yeah.
Let me be an artist. It felt very authentic. I think the fact that she's going with like the kind of Y2K aesthetic, the headphones on, she got the iPhone earpods and everything. It feels like it's really true to her interests, and the aesthetic actually just works so much for her. And I feel like seeing people like Charlie XCX and Lana Del Rey really getting behind her, that's like the ultimate cosign for me. It's like they don't just do that for anybody. And it's like Lana having a Diet Pepsi on her Instagram, and she's driving just in the middle of America on some Lana Del Rey vibes. Like I'm like, okay, these are people who are genius pop stars, strategists, artists. They see something of that in Addison Rae, and that's why they want to get behind it, I think.
I think it's like really important to absorb how unlikely all of this is, because we are, I think, in a cultural moment that is very allergic to the inauthentic. I think we can kind of smell it right away. There's a sense of, oh, this feels like something, beyond our control came together to go like, okay, this was assembled in a boardroom somewhere. And whenever you get that sense, I feel like there's a sense of like, okay, I don't want to mess with this. I'm not rocking with it. But for her to sort of transcend that mountain, it's a much higher and harder mountain to climb. Let's hear a little bit more music from the album.
Put your headphones on. Guess I gotta accept the pain. Need a cigarette to make me feel better. Every good thing comes my way, so I still get told up. Guess I gotta accept the pain. Need a cigarette to make me feel better. Every good thing comes my way, so I put my headphones on.
That's Headphones on. Addison Rae's new album, Addison, is out today. Joan, you stayed up past midnight last night to just be like, okay, let's go. I want the rest of this record. Is it everything that you wanted?
Yeah, it's not just what I was hoping it would be. It really does exceed my expectations. I mean, there's been a lot of chatter about the architects like sonically behind this album. Luca and Elvira, her producers, have definitely been very transparent, as she has, about the Madonna, the Britney, the Prince, the Michael. But the album really, when I walked away from it, actually what it feels like most to me is one of those perfect 90s Janet albums, not just with the use of the interludes, but the breathiness in her vocals. I think Addison probably would admit she's not a strong vocalist, but she's an interesting vocalist. And I think that we have a lot of really interesting pop stars that use their vocals to maximum effect, Britney being one of them, as well as Janet. And I really walked away from it, just the sounds she's exploring and the intimacy of the album. You said earlier, the meta lyricism. I really just think it's astounding to come away from a debut album with a song like Fame is a Gun, especially from a song like In the Rain, is just like, gives me chills. I mean, Fame is a Gun, truly. To write that song as a debut songwriter on your debut album is just incredible. And really the whole thing just glides right by. And it's one of those things I think that we all are just going to have on repeat. I think it really is the album of the summer.
I say all of this, but also it makes me think of this other song that just came out. Let's hear it.
Something so wild will be ordinary. You got me kissing the ground, will be sanctuary. Shatter me with your touch, will Lord return me to dust.
That's the other end of the spectrum, right? Like that song right now is the #1 song in Canada and in the United States. It's called Ordinary. It's by someone named Alex Warren, who I believe was invented yesterday. And he's also a former TikToker who's now kind of trying to make a go of it as a pop singer. Maura, when you see that, when you see like Alex Warren is kind of like the top of the charts, you have this idea of like social media personalities topping the pop charts. Does it make you think we're in the middle of a kind of a different paradigm shift in the music industry, where instead of like making music and then building an audience, maybe you do the other way around? Maybe you build an audience and then say, we know what I shall do, explore music, and then it sort of lets us decide whether we want to rock with your music or not.
I think it's both. I mean, I think going back to what I was saying earlier about the siloed nature of fame, it's very easy to kind of like get that critical mass of fan base, but sustaining attention is what is tough. I mean, Alex Warren, he has his debut album coming out in a couple of months, and it's 20 tracks, which I thought was a very interesting and sort of like, again, with the gutsy move on the debut album, like making it that long. But I think that also allows, for obviously a lot of streams to happen, which pumps things up the charts. See Morgan Wallen. And, I think also there's definitely a crisis in PR across the board right now about just like, how do we get attention? Because there's so much going on, even outside of culture, but definitely in culture. There are so many avenues that people can take, whether it's like go on Hot Ones, go on Fallon, go on, Tiny Desk. Like there are so many ways to get attention that I think it's not a paradigm shift as more as it is just like people just like throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
If folks are just joining us, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Joan Summers is here. Maura Johnston is here. Rollie Pemberton is here. And we have so much to talk about. Okay, I guess it's the show where we talk about all the artists that Charlie XCX likes, because these guys also got her endorsement. But the difference is this one surprised some people.
Not a lot of wisdom when your brain goes to your head. Never heard it singing by your breath. Never heard it singing by your breath.
That is Turnstile. The song is called Look Out For Me. It's from their new album, Never Enough. This is the band that came out of the hardcore punk scene in Baltimore like a decade ago. But Turnstile has been adaptable. They've changed their sound a bunch. They have broadened the sound enough to play places like Jimmy Fallon and open for like Blink-182. And they did this show in their hometown of Baltimore, and 10,000 people showed up, which is quite remarkable. Before I get to you, Joan, on this, Maura, I'll start with you. How did this band sort of start commanding so much mainstream attention? What do you think people are grabbing onto with Turnstile?
I think it's a combination of a few things. First, they are always touted as being like very genre agnostic and very kind of like expansive in their sound, but they do it in a way that doesn't alienate their earlier fan base, which was something that as somebody who lived through the 90s alternative rock boom saw that happen a lot. They toured incessantly. They opened for My Chemical Romance. They opened, like you said, for Blink-182. And they played festivals and got attention at festivals, which, going back to the point about like the choked attention economy, that is a tough thing. But they honed their performance style in those warehouses in Baltimore that are just still, after all these years, like a really great germinating place for great performances. And then they also got co-signs, including Charlie XCX, but they also got like Rob Halford of Judas Priest co-signing them, and like Miguel and Demi Lovato, like all of these people just sort of like telling people to check them out. And their sound is very accessible in a lot of ways. Like when I was listening to the album, I was coming up with a lot of reference points, which I think is a lot of ways in for different listeners and different types of listeners.
The idea of getting a Judas Priest and Charlie XCX endorsement at the same time, I think like that introduces you to the range of people who are like, Turnstile, that's my music. Rollie, when you think about this summer, is Never Enough, is Turnstile going to be the Brat summer of this year?
I don't know if it's gonna go that hard, but
Okay.
to me, listening to the record, like it's giving best alternative album Grammy nominee. I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like it's like they get like a new younger band that
Yeah.
like is just pushing themselves into that mainstream, and I feel like it's like their time for
Yeah.
that. I feel like it's very, I'm not like a huge like hardcore fan or anything, but it's giving like music journalist music. I feel like it's very tailor-made for like the nerdiest tastemaker
man.
like that,
My-
shots fired. Sorry, I don't know.
No, my heart hurts. Maura found dead after that comment. Joan can't even pull it together. Give him music journalist music. I mean, that's a type, and that is a range. It's 100%. There's some music that comes out, and people go like, "Oh, this one's for the critics. Yeesh, this one's, and they're gonna love this one, but nobody else, maybe?" Question mark. Joan, I do think that this raises the question of Charlie as tastemaker, Charlie as someone who just kind of knows where culture kind of is at. What do you make of the idea like Charlie kind of at the center of taste right now?
I mean, people want to be Charlie XCX is the easy answer. I think if you look at the way that culture has trended, TikTok is all about how to get the look, how to get the style, how to get the effect.
Yes.
But I also think like more specifically, more personally to Charlie, people forget that people who make music are fans of music, or at least the good ones are fans of music. Like before listening to Addison this morning, I was listening to like Spiritualized and Broadcast, speaking of music journalists, music, 90s rock. Like I think like Charlie is someone who you listen to her music, and while it can be contemporary, while it can be the zeitgeist, while it can be the mainstream now, it also is made by someone with a lot of interests and tastes. I think it makes perfect sense that she's into Turnstile. The same way it makes perfect sense that she's into Addison Rae. Charlie XCX is a scholar of music. If you listen to her ever talk about like what she listens to, how she puts her albums together, the kinds of influences that she had as a young teenager, a young raver in the UK, I mean, it just makes total sense. And when I see things like, oh my God, why is Turnstile up at Coachella behind Charlie XCX? It's like, well, that's a likely place for them to be if you are probably paying attention.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I heard you, and I take that in, and also I still haven't quite recovered from music journalist music. That would hurt my soul, Rollie. I'm not. I'm a different person before and after.
Hey, I rock that stuff too. It's cool.
Okay, well, speaking of more music that has been endorsed by Charlie XCX, I'm truly counting the minutes until we finally get this album. Let's hear a bit of the new Lorde song.
Who's gonna love me like this? Who could give me like this? Where he flowed down through me, love me like this. Now I'm broken open. Let's hear it for the man of the year.
That is Lorde, Man of the Year. That is the second single from her album Virgin, which comes out later this month. A lot of people are talking about this record, particularly because I think the video of it shows Lorde dancing topless, her breast covered with duct tape. She's framing this as an album of her sort of working through some questions about gender, working through some questions about transformation. Maura, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you make of the way that Lorde is rolling out this record?
I mean, we're talking about it right now, so it's successful.
It's working.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that in a cynical way either,
Yeah.
just like, the fact that like it is being talked about. But, I think that, she's somebody who was groomed for fame from a very, very young age, and she's going to grow up in public, because she has to, because if she doesn't, the alternative is not great. So I think that, being a young woman in public means that you're going to be under a microscope, and she's been under a microscope since she was, 16, 15. Reveling in the freedom of like realizing that she doesn't have to conform to anybody's expectations. I think that that's something that a lot of listeners will resonate with, particularly, I teach at Boston College, and like I've had students who have said, Lorde is like an older sibling to me, somebody who I've grown up with, somebody whose milestones have coexisted with my milestones. So I think it's really interesting to see how like younger listeners will react to this.
I do think that like the secret weapon in Lorde's arsenal has always been her timing. I do think that she's actually like an artist of perfect timing more than anything else.
Yeah.
So like the things that she has to say tend to be conversations that people are just about ready to have, and there's something about about this one that maybe feels a little bit later than the conversations that people have already maybe had. Joan, I'll ask you about this because I think unfortunately for Lorde, this video has gotten some negative attention as well, namely from the French singer Raheem Redcar, formerly known as Christine and the Queens. Those are two artists who have toured together. Raheem claims that Lorde is copying part of his stage act where he appeared topless with tape over his breasts. After Man of the Year video comes out, he wrote on Instagram, "To Lorde, I guess you're welcome, LOL. So weird to see such constant elements of my work being digested and put forward without ever being credited as inspiration." Joan, do you hear that and go, yeah, I think Raheem maybe has legitimate grievance here?
Yeah, back to music writer, music critic. I would describe Lorde as Substack music to me.
Whoa.
Guys, I can't cope.
We're going to
I
talk
can't
the
cope.
generational differences here.
That one was for me.
I will say that this is the least surprising drama that I have ever seen unfold over people putting tape over their breasts in my entire life. I mean, I am a product of the Tumblr generation. I was posting in like 2010, and I have seen the tape over the breast basically my entire life. It is like an image that has percolated. And as a trans woman, it is definitely a kind of art that I have experienced amongst my peers. And so I think that the Raheem element of this is really the like least interesting part of this conversation because all art is derivative, and this definitely feels extremely derivative. I don't want to say that Lorde's feelings about her body and her gender identity, which she has recently described as expansive. She said that some days I'm a man, some days I'm a woman. I think that all of that aside, I don't want to diminish that or sound like I'm belittling that, but I think that ultimately what we're seeing, you said it perfectly, it is a conversation that feels like it's arriving a little bit late. You can tell that this is something that Lorde is sitting on and has been stewing in for more than just the Solar Power album cycle, if you listen to her interview clips about it. And so it feels like we're kind of jumping into something that happened a while ago, and she's maybe made up her mind about it, but the art and the aesthetics and the inspirations around it didn't necessarily catch up with her. And so I'm reading it all and I'm processing it all. And from a gossip perspective, I certainly hope that we get more responses from both of them. But I just think that I would like to see her refresh the palette a little bit, so to speak, because if we're going to say somebody owns tape over the breasts, I think the
copyright is not going to support that, is it?
Of certain demographics are going to have an issue with that. Yeah.
I don't want to give people the impression that this is the only discussion we're going to have about this Lorde record. When it comes out, we're absolutely going to talk about it. But also, when that song played, when Man of the Year, when we played the little snippet of Man of the Year, Rollie, I saw you. I saw your fist pumping in the air. I know you ride hard for Lorde. Tell me about your expectations for this record. We're maybe like 3 weeks away from it.
Yeah, I just want to preface this with saying I'm ready to die for Lorde. I ride really hard for her, and I'm a big fan.
And he's got a Substack too, so
I do have a Substack, cadenceweapon.substack.com. So it's Substack music all day and all night. I was a really big fan of Melodrama. I feel like that album is really a masterpiece. I feel like she reminds me of Paul Simon, very songwriterly, and I feel like this album is going to be similar to Melodrama, but maybe a little more thorny and a little more difficult, and that really excites me. I like listening to Lorde kind of grapple with the vulnerability and the kind of in between kind of feelings. I feel like I'm just really excited to see where it's going to go. I love both singles so far, and yeah, I'm ready to die for Lorde.
Listen, you don't have to do it yet because the album doesn't come out till the end of the month. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm also ready to die for Lorde. We are going to say goodbye. We're going to say goodbye. Now we got to leave it there. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to play you guys a song that I think will be the song of the summer. Let's hear it. Hey. That is this very group chat's own Cadence Weapon, Rollie Pemberton. Dude, this song is
Substack
so
music,
good.
You know the vibes.
Drop
Let's
today,
go.
Infiltrator. I appreciate your time. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. This song is called Infiltrator by Cadence Weapon. We're out. See you next week.